Good to go?
Sibilance.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton Equestrian Committee for Wednesday, February the 12th, 2025 to order. The time is now 6:30 p.m. as I call roll this evening. Please confirm your attendance. Nan Buckner.
Here.
Teresa Jarmus.
Here.
Mac Plummer.
Here.
Shanna Regan Quidley.
Here.
Tony Rich is here. Carson Seville.
Here.
Julie Shannon is not here. For the record, Julie is missing tonight. Otherwise, everyone is here. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item on our agenda is the approval of our meeting agenda. Does anyone have any changes or amendments they'd like to make? No?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'd like to make a motion for item 7 to add after 7A, just discussion of pasture planting and other benefits that we could provide. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Can I get a motion for that change and a second, please?
Motion.
Motion from Mr. Plummer, second from Ms. Buckner. All in favor? Aye, that passes. Next is approval of our past meeting minutes. If everyone has had a chance to review those minutes, if I could get a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from the January meeting, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the Wednesday, January 15th minutes.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes from Ms. Buckner. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Regan Quidley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes from last month are approved. Emily, do we have any public comment?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, well, good. Well, if that's the case, then we will move on to our next item, which is staff updates. The first item is discussion of large lot incentives project, agricultural use exemptions. And I'll welcome Jeff Strickland and Shuba to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, Milton's Equestrian Committee. I'm Shuba Jangam, Principal Planner for the city. I'm here with a large lot incentives project, one of our priority projects from Comprehensive 2040 plan. We kicked off the Equestrian Committee's engagement last month. And as we shared last time, we will continue to come to the meetings with one or two incentives for the focused discussion. So today we have a couple of things. First, we're going to quickly go over background and introduction, and we're going to move into agricultural use exemptions discussions. We have a subject matter expert in the house with us today, and he's going to lead the discussions for it. And after that, we are going to have a closer look at hobby farms and incentives related to that, which may be the most useful thing for Milton residents. The key information that I want all of us to remember every time we meet is that the goal of this project is preserving large lot in Milton. And some of the objectives that it supports are controlling density, contributing to open space, maintaining tree canopy, preserving wildlife habitat, enhancing Milton's rural character. And we meant to have these incentives for current property owners as well as future property owners. And when I say large lot property, I really mean properties that are 3 acres or more. Just wanted to clarify that. Oh, also wanted to share that we have launched a project website for this one, and it has all the information consolidated on it, the previous meeting links and FAQs. I just want to share this as a great resource for any kind of community discussions that you may have with, your neighbors, and so you can always share this one with everything is right there for them to catch up on this one. Going back to our main topic, agricultural use exemption, we have a few things to clarify for Milton residents here. Because most of the properties in Milton are zoned AG1 and agricultural use is allowed on that one, there is a little bit of confusion among property owners that they're exempt from city regulations, which is really not the case. So first task at hand is to make sure that we understand what agricultural use exemption is, who is it really for, and what it offers, and then move on to looking into hobby farms and what city could offer to the hobby farms. To shed light on this agricultural use exemption, I would like to invite city's legal expert, Jeff Strickland.
Hold for applause. And
We're tempted.
how's everyone doing tonight? Yeah, thank you, thank you. Let me see if I can work this thing. Nope.
This is separate. So
Okay.
it actually escape from here.
Have to escape.
Yes, and you have to go.
There you go. Look at that fancy thing. All right, this was recently circulated, I think, a copy of this presentation to everyone, maybe just a few days ago, and hopefully you poured through it, really studied it, understand everything. I'm kidding, of course, because it's pretty dense information. I'm not going to get too into the weeds on it, but I do want to use it as an overview of sort of bringing you up to speed as to where we are with respect to this issue, how we've dealt with it here in the city over the last number of years, the origins of this presentation, this particular presentation, though it's been updated a bit, dates back almost 3 years, where Ken Gerard presented on an update to the Milton City Council with respect to agricultural use exemptions, current status of state law, how that's reflected in the city's code, and we'll go through that with some brevity. But stop me anytime you want, ask questions. This is meant to be a sort of dialogue about this as we get through it. Shuba said I was limited to 2 hours, so I will make sure to keep it under that time frame.
Perfect.
That's the last joke I'm going to tell.
Nothing worse than a long-winded lawyer.
That's right. That's right. So the first slide gets into a state law general prohibition under Title II. It's 2-1-6. This is one that caused a little bit of consternation early on as folks read it. I think over time, as we started to kind of think about it more and study it, it alleviated some of the worry that folks had with respect to its applicability, and it's really fairly limited. So this, I'll raise it because it's in the statute, but this isn't really a focal point in the issues that we're really addressing when it comes to agricultural use. But here at 2-1-6, you do have a state law that prohibits, in this case, a city from adopting some sort of law that regulates crop management or animal husbandry practices involved in the production of agricultural or farm products on any private property. That's a quote from subsection A. It's very specific to crop management, very specific to animal husbandry practices. I don't know of any particular ordinances that are on the books that specifically relate to crop management or animal husbandry that the city has. But I wanted to point that out just to make sure everyone understood that that is out there. There is a recognition within this particular statute about preserving a city's zoning authority. That's a very important authority that cities have to determine the uses and appropriate uses of property through some sort of zoning regulation, which the city of Milton has had since its origins. Any questions about that statute?
I have a question about the first one. In regards to husbandry practices, I think a municipality should have some sort of say over things like somebody starving or mistreating animals. How does that fall into that? So if a resident would make a complaint saying, there's a starving horse in this pasture next to me, is the city not going to take any kind of action on that?
I think that would be handled under some sort of almost like a criminal investigation for cruelty to animals, where a claim could be brought or a charge could be brought against the owner of the
Okay.
animal with respect to
I just didn't
mistreatment
want
of
that
the
to be
animal.
an out for someone who was, starving horses.
We actually had that happen. I won't say where, but I think animal control, and then the state came in, took the horse, 6 chickens, and 50 dogs.
Brought charges.
So that's a
Wow.
different statute.
It is, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was a different one.
But there are regulations like that out there that do provide for opportunities to take action. Yes.
Okay.
And this doesn't prohibit those from being
Gotcha.
on the books.
And at some point, will you tie, like, animal husbandry, will you tie that into the horse farms that is what we mostly have here in Milton? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you think 98% of all the farms in the city of Milton are similar in some capacity, whether they've got 2 donkeys or they've got 50 horses and run a commercial training out. I mean, there's not a whole lot of crop production in Milton, but I guess I just want to take this and connect it to our current situation.
Or define animal husbandry,
Yeah.
maybe.
I think raising animals on property and using properties within the city that are appropriately zoned to rear animals. I use that correctly? Rear animals?
Sure.
Is much broader than this animal husbandry prohibition, which really is focused on the husbandry portion of it and the manner in which someone engages in animal husbandry. I don't think the city's involved in at all. I think
So that's basically horse keeping. for
the
all
manner
intents
in
and
which you would keep horses is
Right.
not regulated by the city. Whether or not you can keep horses on any particular property would be regulated by the city. And that's much broader than just
Okay,
the limited practice of animal husbandry, which under this particular statute, there's state law protection of that type of activity.
Okay.
They want to encourage agricultural use. They want to encourage farms. They want to encourage cattle and various practices. And this is a statute that's on the books that you never hear about, frankly, unless someone like me brings it up. But it is out there.
Thank you.
The other statutes that we're going to talk about are much more specific and are much more pointed to the activities, I think, that we're looking at today. The next slide jumps to Title 12, Chapter 7. Here, the Soil Erosion and Sedimentation Act of 1975 is codified here, updated over time. There are some definitions, of course, at 12-7-3 regarding what a land disturbing activity is. At sub 9, you'll see there's a carve out there in the definition that says that term does not include agricultural practices described in paragraph 5 of Code Section 12-7-17. That's the exceptions to the requirements of the Act statute that we'll get to in a moment. Next slide at 12-7-4 regarding ordinances regarding land disturbing activities. You'll see there's some highlighted sections there regarding the city's ability and authority to adopt such land disturbing activity related ordinances. They have to be consistent with the standards provided in the chapter. There's a big push from a policy standpoint from the state to maintain a certain minimum level of regulation and authority with respect to this, particularly with respect to local issuing authorities. And I'm going to talk more about that. City of Milton is a local issuing authority. We want to keep it that way, keep those application review processes local instead of having property owners take things to the state, which is unduly burdensome. But we have to make sure that we're not operating outside the parameters of that And some of that is really what I'm going to get into today, because I think that helps frame things that you all will be discussing when you're discussing potential incentives to incentivize agricultural use. You don't want to recommend or push forward a proposed incentive that ends up operating outside of the limitations of local issuing authority requirements. -7-6 regarding best management practices, requiring the city at a minimum protections at least as stringent as the state general permit. This again ties into the limitations of how far, which is not at all, the city can go in developing some sort of a policy that unduly expands the benefits or detriments of the state general permit provisions. -7 regarding land disturbing activities. Just briefly at sub A, no land disturbing activity shall be conducted in this state. And then in bold, you see, except those land disturbing activities provided for in code section 2-7-17 without securing a permit. So that 2-7-17, which we're getting to, is where those exceptions to this permit requirement are found. So here at 12-7-17, it provides this chapter, which is all of this chapter 7, this entire act, shall not apply to the following activities. Sub 3 references home gardens. That's highlighted, but more importantly, sub 5 refers to agricultural operations. That's underlined. That is a term, a defined term, defined in Title I of the codified state laws at 1-3-3. We'll get to that in a moment. It's important to understand that statute, and we're going to get to it, because it's cited in multiple different sections that relate to exemptions, and it keeps pointing back to that 1-3-3. Here, under the exceptions to the basically land disturbance permit process, you have a exception for what's called agricultural operations. That's a term that's defined in 1-3-3. So there's a definition there, but that definition, as provided here, also includes the following. Those practices involving the establishment, cultivation, or harvesting of products of the field or orchard, the preparation and planting of pasture land, farm ponds, dairy operations, livestock and poultry management practices, and the construction of farm buildings. You'll see that that's an even broader definition when we get into what 1-3-3 says. Just as a little aside, well, let me back up for a second. What we're focused on are activities that people may undertake or seek to undertake on their private properties. So the analysis of whether an agricultural use exemption applies is based on what is it that the property owner is seeking to do on their property and why. So that's an important, those are important elements to understand. And later in the presentation, you'll see some modifications we've made over the years to the city's code regarding a predetermination process. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But it's not specific to how the property is zoned. It's not related to some general definition of agricultural use. If you're out there and your plan is to cut a tree down, are you cutting that tree down in furtherance of some farm use, or are you cutting that tree down for some non-related farm use? And that's the analysis that is undertaken to determine whether cutting that tree down is exempted, or whether it falls under the requirements of other processes the city has that might prevent you or prevent that homeowner or property owner from cutting that tree down. Okay. 12-7-18, there's a section of the Act under Chapter 7 there that specifically points out that nothing in the exceptions or allowances under the Act should be read in any way to allow or justify any violations of a Clean Water Act or Water Quality Control Act. The city doesn't enforce the Clean Water Act, but a lot of the best management practices that are sought to be kept in place are really, when you talk about stormwater, when you talk about runoff, when you talk about erosion, are intended to protect state waterways and keep natural waterways from being filled up with sediment or otherwise deteriorated or even destroyed. So here we are at 1-3-3, where at sub 4.1, you see this long-winded paragraph that provides the term agriculture, the term agricultural operations, or the term agricultural or farm products, all used synonymous within the state law as far as state law is concerned. And it means everything that you see written there in that particular definition. It's very broad. It is specific to agricultural operations. I can read it if you'd like, but I think that you can have your opportunity to read that, ask any questions you might have with respect to how it might be interpreted. But that's what we're operating within. That is the definition under state law of agricultural operation. Those are the operations that are exempt from sort of LDP permitting. Those are the operations that are essentially exempt from some stormwater requirements. And there are other aspects of the city's code where agricultural uses or agricultural operations are also exempt. And in those, like we'll get to, there also is a reference back to this state law definition.
Why does it not say horses?
I don't know why. Did you say why does it not say horses? I don't know why it doesn't say horses. It does say including but not limited to whenever it has some sort of a laundry list of things. And so I certainly think that horses would be included in the definition there. There's no doubt that it would be.
What do you think on the whole commercial discussion that, I think they did a lot with Ken a few years ago on that, but with regards to this, and if you got to get to this later, we can wait, but that's always been the
Let's have a brief
question.
discussion about it because I think that's a good point. I think that there's no case law that provides a definition of producing or products that specifically ties to commercial endeavor. I think that you could argue that production equals commercial, but it doesn't say that. And so if someone wanted to challenge that in a court of law, they'd have a pretty good case, I think, to argue that as written, the statutes shouldn't be read that narrowly. Okay. And the courts are going to sort of side with the plain language of the statute. What does it say? They're not going to read into it as to what it doesn't say, not necessarily. They'll try to give the words their plain definitional understanding of what those words are being used to convey or say. And I think that producing, if you were to drill down on some sort of definition of producing, if you looked it up in the dictionary, it's not going to be limited to just some sort of commercial endeavor.
Can we go back to the
slide.
the other slide?
Because, the hurdle here is you don't want to give someone freedom to do whatever they want because they sell a carton of eggs and get out of an LDP and stormwater. Now, I mean, if they're ag exempt, they're ag exempt. But what we don't want to happen is someone silts up a creek, EPA gets involved, or whoever, and then we lose our issuing authority, because if that happens, we basically have no committee because the state's going to be deciding what gets built here, not the city. So that's what we
You're
don't
right.
want
We
to
have to
happen.
keep that, we have to keep that framework in mind.
But how would they pull the issuing authority though, if someone had a right to say, based on this definition, I'm ag exempt?
Because they're doing what?
They managing livestock.
Producing.
Managing livestock.
They got 2 horses, they're managing them.
Yeah, they're feeding and managing
Yeah,
livestock.
but they're not making an income doing that.
That's why I asked the commercial question though.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Go
right.
ahead and avoid
But it doesn't,
that.
I don't see the word commercial here. It just says agricultural operations.
Right.
It could be a private, not-for-profit, private agricultural operation.
Does it say commercial anywhere in the, I thought Ken talked about that in that speech.
We have, and I
I think he was asking.
early
is that
on, I
commercial?
talked, that's right. I talked early on about commercial because, and I'll back you up a little bit to talk more as I get deeper into the
Right.
presentation about sort of the history.
Oh, that's-
But what we were looking at was how are we limiting the definition of agricultural use?
Mhm.
Because agricultural use definition is going to limit our ability to regulate activity.
Right.
So if we are able to define that term as narrowly as possible, then we're able to regulate as much as possible,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
What we don't want to do is generate in our minds a definition of agricultural use that allows for exceptions to the state law requirements that the state law wouldn't promote or agree with. If they don't agree with it, that's when you run the risk of losing your issuing authority because you're operating outside the strict parameters of the act. Once we define what agricultural use means, and I think that was part of the conversation a few years ago, it's do you, city council, not you committee necessarily, but does the city council want to take a hardline position on the definition of agricultural use under state law and read into it, subject to some future challenge perhaps, that it strictly relates to commercial activity?
I was under the impression that the word commercial was a key part of that discussion, but I'm not seeing that.
You're not. That's because I don't know what the end result of those conversations was.
Right.
I know that I didn't prepare any ordinances to amend any of the city's code with respect to adding commercial to highlight that aspect.
Could they add commercial? Could the municipality add commercial requirement on there and then
Well,
enforce that? Or is
That would
this
be a good
the
idea.
definition
Why
from the
would you want
state?
to do that though?
Well, you wouldn't, but I'm just, since they had, why would you want to do what? Add the
Add
commercial?
commercial.
Well,
Because then you would exclude
Right.
most of the
Right.
properties that we're trying to protect.
right. The
think.
issue here, and I mean, the issue the city and other cities have seen is you get somebody that says, hey, I'm ag, and then they go clear a whole lot with no, now they're supposed to follow the best management practices and can't, negate this Clean Water Act, but you get some bad apples and then ugly.
well,
And then
if
the
I may,
city's
that,
getting sued.
Yep.
Right. So
that's where we were. That's where we were several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe now, where the issue that the city administration was faced with is they were finding out about problems through code enforcement. Code enforcement would get sent out to investigate some sort of property activity that was going on at property when there was no record of any application for a permit with respect to that activity. Someone's clearing a lot, as what the example that you're using.
Yep.
Someone's out there just knocking down trees. There's no indication that they applied for or received a permit from the city to do so. Code enforcement goes out, warnings, violation notices, stop work orders, whatever they do to start interacting with that property owner. Property owner turns around and says, I'm exempt. This is agricultural property. I can do whatever I want on my property. The code says I don't have to come in and apply for a permit. I'm
But to
exempt.
clean that, they would have to follow up with activities that fit the definition of agricultural operation.
Yeah, but it's so
That's why
broad.
ultimately we started moving to amend the code, and we did in several particulars, to add this predetermination requirement. So what we tried to clarify in several sections of the city's code, and I don't really know how it's working, frankly. Maybe Shuba can speak to it a little bit if she even knows, but what a property owner is supposed to do, if they believe they are entitled to an exemption, they still have to come in and apply. They have to tell the city, this is what I'm planning to do. I believe I have an exemption that applies to my activity. Here's the information that relates to what I plan to do. The city
Is that
says,
in the code they have to apply, or is that,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, they
That-
have
that
to
was
actually get a
recently added.
pre-approval before they,
It was added in 21 and 22. There
So
were
they
two
can't,
sections.
claim ag exempt after the fact. They really should apply before the work starts.
before,
They
so that
have
we
to.
can
They have
create
to
a
submit it and
record of it.
Get it.
Okay.
The determination of the application of the exemption should be made by the city.
Mhm.
The city should be given the opportunity to say, give me everything you've got. Tell me what you're doing. Let us determine if we think that the exemption applies to your activity or not.
Does the city make the decision, or they send it to the state to make the decision?
City,
The city would make the decision if you're ag exempt. or not.
community development director makes the decision.
Mhm.
Well, then I guess if the applicant doesn't like the answer, then they can appeal to the state.
That's correct. Yeah.
Have y'all had any since in the past year come in?
Yes, actually, there are a couple of, they have applied.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if they were approved or not, but I have heard that there were some applications that came in.
So if they apply and the city says granted, then there's no issue. But if the city doesn't agree, then they can appeal it to the state, which might delay it or.
Yeah, if a property owner comes in and says, I'm cutting down trees because my property is zoned agricultural and I don't have to get a permit to cut down trees. I'm cutting down trees because I don't want these trees here, right?
But it can be
They should
zoned
have-
agricultural. Well, don't you have to actually have an agricultural operation
Yeah.
in addition to the zoning?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, people come in, they think they're entitled just because of the
Because
way
it's
their
zoned
property's
ag.
zoned,
Okay.
but
Well, ignorance is no excuse, right? I mean,
That's correct. The way that your property's zoned, but if we're dealing with it after the fact, the trees were already cut down.
Right.
If we're trying to get ahead of things before the unpermitted activity occurs, that's better for everyone, you know, because what do? You make them replant, you're never going to get those old trees back, right?
Right.
Not anytime soon.
I guess if the fine's big enough, maybe.
I mean, it sounds like if you came to the city and said any of these items, this is the definition, this is what I'm doing, that's the reason for me doing this, then
Yeah, that becomes
It
black
would-
and white analysis, I think. But the ones that are tricky aren't the ones that are easy. You know, the ones that are tricky are the ones that are more gray.
It would be
I
nice to
can't
see a
come up
few
with any.
case studies
Yeah,
of
we'll see if
tricky-
we can't put something
I mean,
together.
that would just be interesting to see some that are really gray and, would illustrate that point. I think
Right.
that would be helpful because you're right. The ones that just seem to be very straightforward, those aren't the ones that are really the issue, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. That's good.
So just as an aside, I pulled a couple of things, and then I'll get back to the slides. In the city's codification of its soil erosion, sedimentation, and pollution control, at section 20-493, that's where the exemptions are listed, pretty much mirrors the state law requirements and exemptions that we were looking at. And at sub 5, it specifically calls out agricultural operations as defined in OCGA 1-3-3. So it refers back to that state law definition and then provides the other items that are accepted from sort of LDP permitting requirements there. I also noted, Carson, I think you raised the question about tree canopy conservation. And I pulled a copy of section 60-5 under the tree canopy conservation chapter, 60-5. And under sub B, it provides that the activities, properties, and trees that are exempt from the requirements of the tree ordinance are, and then at number 4, it says, tree removal for ongoing forest management practices, including timber management and agricultural operations as defined in OCGA 1-3-3 sub 4.1. So it refers back to that Title I definition, as you see on the screen, of agricultural operations, and it recognizes that there's an exemption to the tree canopy conservation requirements for that activity or those activities.
And is that referenced in our current city tree ordinance?
Yeah, 60-5.
That's
that on-
out,
is
that's
that on
out
the
of our tree
slideshow?
ordinance or out of the state?
Yours,
Oh, okay.
City of Milton.
I thought you had a slide on that.
Oh, maybe I didn't get far enough on it. Maybe I do.
You do have a slide on it for sure.
Getting ahead of myself, I guess.
Rat tails.
One more, maybe.
There's more to 1-3-3 beyond just agricultural operations at 4.1. There's also definitions that are related to crops or growing crops. Here, it specifically does say for sale. So for the term growing crops, where it talks in terms of crops or growing crops, there is, based on the definition of 7.1, I would say, a commercial component there.
Yeah.
And other agricultural products that are produced for sale. See that?
Mm-hmm.
But as it relates to horses, it doesn't say horses for sale.
It does not. That definition is limited to crops.
Got
It
it.
does say breeding stock.
That's under the, yeah.
That's rat tags.
Rat
Oh,
type
that's rat
family.
tags. Yeah.
Okay.
But the term sale is not used in 16.1.
Mm-hmm.
Trees.
Attorney General opinion from 1987 that just holds that the way we're interpreting the exceptions is correct. Some of the city's code provisions here, floodplain management. There's a permit required for floodplain activity. 20-67. Here we did add a new subsection D, as you see on the slide. This was back in the end of 2021, requiring that predetermination of the application of the exemption. And this is the language there that requires that. If someone doesn't get the predetermination, there could be a 5-year hold on any permits that they might seek to apply
Wow.
for regarding the subject property. Tried to give it some teeth.
That's pretty good. Can you go back a slide? You're talking about floodplain management. Like, we had the one situation in Milton for the covered arena. That's it has taken a while. Even if the city did create an incentive that allowed covered
Right.
arenas on properties in excess of 10 acres, for instance.
Right.
If that property had floodplain, this would still apply.
Yes.
They would need a use permit, but they would still have to go through a
Yes, of
permit,
course.
That's right.
just like any other. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's what I hear. Finally.
Am I reading this right, that even if you qualify as ag activities, you're not exempt from a floodplain clearing? Is that right? Or
I believe that's right.
I know this is the city, not the state that we're looking at, but these are city ordinances or provisions. But what if somebody was on a floodplain or had floodplain on their property, has cows on it, let's say? Could they go clear trees in that floodplain to let their cows graze there?
There is a ability to clear trees. I don't remember if it's in the materials or not, but there's a limitation on, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, that's
I don't
all right.
want to say it
No,
wrong
yeah,
because
it's okay.
Good question.
And I think
Was it
they
in the
do
stream
treat
buffer?
floodplain a little differently than stream
I
buffers.
think I'm thinking of stream buffer. That's why I was getting
Well,
confused.
stream buffer for sure. 'Cause you
Yeah,
have your
yeah.
state and
Floodplain
federal
doesn't stay
setbacks.
forever like that.
But, and you have wetlands, that's much different than floodplain. So
Right, that's right.
it's,
And there's language in here around stream buffers too, right?
mhm.
There is. And I think what I was thinking about, I believe, is in the stream buffer section, not floodplain management section. This is added not specifically because of agricultural use exemption, but this is added because there are exemptions that relate to the permit. And the reason the language was added at sub D was taking into consideration if there's any exemption to any permit, the city should be the one to determine if the exemptions apply. That's why this is here. Stormwater management, again, a requirement to get a permit unless specifically exempted by the article. Following activities at 20-240, following activities are exempt from this article. It specifically relates to agricultural or civicultural land management activities within areas zoned for these activities. Stream buffer protections, there's a state buffer, there's an extended buffer that the city maintains. Grandfather provisions listed in the 20-383. I know I'm going quick, so bear with me, but stop me if you have any particular questions.
Silviculture.
Existing development and ongoing land disturbance activities, including but not limited to existing agriculture, civiculture, landscaping, gardening, lawn maintenance. Exceptions under A2, forestry and civiculture activities on land that is zoned for forestry, civiculture, or agricultural uses and are not identical or incidental to other land development activity. This is language that already exists in the city's code. That's why it's highlighted here.
Okay, thank you.
And you see reference there to as amended per ordinance from 2022. And at the next slide, we added that predetermination requirement. Same language basically as you saw in the previous provision we were looking at. But again, to the extent there are exceptions that may apply to the permit, we want the city to have the opportunity to determine the applicability of those. We talked about soil erosion, sedimentation, and pollution control. Of course, permits are required unless there is a exemption that applies. We talked about agricultural operations as defined in section 1-3-3 of state law.
Help me understand this a little bit better. I mean, so an agricultural operation, feeding, breeding, managing livestock, and it is an exemption to the city code.
It's an exemption to the permit requirement that you would be under with respect to land disturbing activity. You'd be exempt from that. You'd be exempt from the city's regulations with respect to land disturbing activity because these activities are recognized as being outside the definition of land disturbing activity.
But would that individual still have responsibility for silt control?
Oh, yeah.
Not
Best
improving
management
the neighbor's
practices
property?
would, yes.
Okay,
They have to follow the best management
they
practices.
still have to follow. Okay,
So if I was doing it, I would still have silt fence and
understood.
probably, I just wouldn't
You wouldn't need a
follow it
permit.
to it. I wouldn't have an engineer maybe unless I needed one.
That is the case, or you think that's the case?
You have to follow the best management practices. So like there's a you get a
Blue
blue
book.
card, blue book,
But you're saying anyone who
follow that.
has an agricultural property and has an agricultural operation is not required to get a land disturbance permit?
They're exempt from the permit. If their activity qualifies for the exemption, the city needs to have the opportunity to determine if the exemption applies, which is what the language that we've added to the city code operates as. The benefit, one of the benefits, at least I think it works this way, when a property owner comes in with all of their stuff and sits down with staff and says, here's my plan. This, I think the exemption applies, but here's my plan for what I'm going to do or what I want to do. It gives the city, who are subject matter experts with respect to the activity that they're talking about doing, to review it and then have conversations with the property owner to suggest, well, maybe you're exempt from permitting, but here are things that you should consider doing that are best management practices that you should put in place to keep these other issues that may arise, that if they do arise, you're going to be held responsible or liable for. So I think it provides a platform for the city
Gives the
to
city some
say,
protection.
looking at everything that you're doing, here's how you should, here's recommendations for what you might consider in going forward. Yes, you don't have to, you're exempt from a permit, let's say, but specific to the activity that you're seeking to undertake on your property, based on the site plan that you've provided to us, based on our QPublic maps or floodplain maps or whatever it is we might pull up as a result of those conversations. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Things
the
like that happening?
Site plan requirement is there, and you just don't get to presume that you are exempt. First, you have to clarify what the.
Well, you're talking
city's
about
doing.
new applicants, right? For new,
Yes.
What
Any new
about,
activity, that's
what about
correct.
an existing farm that is going to go out and grade a pasture and create a lot of soil disturbance, but for
Well,
the agricultural
If
operation?
it's an existing farm, the existing operations aren't subject to some sort of review or regulation except for ongoing activity.
But if there was going to be land disturbance?
Yes, if they come in and say, I'm going to clear this 10-acre site, right? If they're clearing it because they want to put in 20 pickleball courts, that's not going to be approved. That's not an agricultural use. I don't think pickleball is an
So
agricultural use.
what if somebody came in and said, hey, I got 20 acres over here. I'm going to put cows on it. And I got cows out in Texas. I'm going to bring them in. They go clear the whole place, build them a house. 2 years later, you drive by, there's not a cow out there.
Well, we've talked about that before, and we talked about, in fact, at the previous meeting, I was sitting here and for some reason, that same kind of question came up, or I leaned over and mentioned something to Steve, the city manager, Mr. Krokoff. We can include language and should in our code that provides that if you undertake land clearing, what was the fellow's name that was here before? Anyway, it'll come to me.
They came to speak.
No. Former, well, never mind. It'll come to me. A city employee.
Jerry Ober.
No, way before that.
Scott Thatch.
Nope, way before.
Oh, okay. All right. I
He's a
won't
builder
remember.
now, I think. Anyway, sorry, I'm wasting
Scott?
your time. No, not Scott.
Well,
That's okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Adding language into the city's code that provides that if you go in and let's say clear land intended for legitimately an agricultural use, you're going to be prohibited from converting that area into some non-agricultural use for a certain specified number of time, 5 years or however long.
Yeah.
You have to maintain that property in an agricultural use state for a certain number of years, right? You can't, and the specific example, the hypothetical that comes up is always that one, right? It's, I'm clearing the land because I'm going to grow hay. I get the land cleared and, I decide that I'm now going to sell my property to a developer who gets to come in and buy cleared land. And it was really all just a sham. I
Right.
never intended to plant hay.
There's protection there, or at
Well,
least
the-
you're suggesting there.
the developer would have to hit the tree canopy requirement at that time for that land to develop it, but
They don't have to plant trees though, do they?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd love to see if someone did try to rig the system, the city have the capability to increase some requirements to prevent that from happening. Because
And I think we can certainly do that.
Almost like,
That's-
a CUVA having a 10-year window.
Yeah, we
Same
need to
kind
have
of-
some window.
Those are
in there.
things that we can definitely do as recommended modifications to the city's code to help address some of those
think that's a
activities
great
and
idea.
keep them from getting out of hand.
But I guess the question I was asking earlier is we're talking about someone who is buying property, clearing land with the intention of putting cattle on it. I'm saying if.
That's legitimate. That's an
Yeah,
agricultural
I get
use.
that. But if you have someone who currently has a piece of property, let's say they've got a 4-acre pasture and they say, you know what, this pasture, the contours are wrong. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to bring a bulldozer in and I'm going to take the whole 4 acres and I'm going to recontour it and shape it and berm it and do whatever I need to do to it because it's an existing agricultural operation, do they need a permit to do that?
What is the purpose of the land disturbance?
To make the pasture more suitable for grazing and
Yes, I would say that's a legitimate.
so no permit
agricultural use.
required, but best practices are expected.
They would
Correct.
need to come
Still
into
have
the
to come
city
in,
and give
Still have to
notice.
present your plan to the city, give them an
So
opportunity.
you would have to, why are you submitting a plan to the city if you don't need a permit?
Well, it's not a
Because you don't
detailed-
know yet if you need a permit or not. You don't get to decide that.
Okay.
The city gets to decide that, right?
I don't know. I'm asking that. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
well,
the way we've edited
That's the way the ordinance
code.
is written, but then you could appeal to the state, I guess, if
Okay.
you feel like you're right, the city's
Sure.
wrong.
Sure, yeah.
That,
okay.
You always have
the thing I
redress.
struggle with that on is how broad this definition is, and it's not very black
How
and
broad the
white.
state
So,
law definition is?
yeah, of agricultural operations.
Yeah,
So
it is
that's where
broad.
it's going to be tough for the city
Yeah.
to say, you're not ag, and say, well, I'm doing what it says right here. And
We have to
That's tough.
recognize that that's agricultural use.
yeah, let me ask you one more
We're
question,
we're
and I'll
locked
let you
in on that.
finish.
We don't have any control except to go to the General Assembly and get it edited somehow.
So
Yeah.
on the first or second slide, we had farm buildings on there. Do we have any idea how that's defined?
Not.
That's very broad, right?
That's
That could be
extremely
a chicken
broad.
coop or a 20-stall barn.
Could be a run-in, like we were talking
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah.
That's a farm building.
I mean,
It's
would it
not to farm.
exempt someone from?
But that's only as it relates to land disturbance, right?
No. That's what my question is. So
But
we
I
talked
saw
about
where
land
you flagged
disturbance.
that earlier.
When it said farm buildings there, to what extent is that? If it's used for, if I'm building a run-in shed for my horses, or a barn,
Right there.
or a tractor barn to put my hay equipment in.
So this is specific to land disturbance permitting.
Okay, then that's all I needed.
It's specific to land
Got
disturbance
it.
permitting.
All right.
Yeah, it
It's
doesn't have anything
under,
to do
it's
with
under
permanent
that
building.
12-7,
It's just a
and
land
it's the same language is, put a pin in that there where it says agricultural operations under 12-7-17, the exceptions.
This is great.
And here at the end, this is from the city's code 20-493, specific to its codified version of the Soil Erosion, Sedimentation, and Pollution Control Act, basically. At the very end, sub F, the OCGA 1-3-3 definition plus A through F. F at the end says farm buildings and farm ponds. Now, I went back and looked as I was digging around and found that the model ordinance that is pushed out for local jurisdictions to adopt or use as a platform to adopt was last updated in 2016. Okay. And this language isn't changed from then. I think this actually, we last edited any of this back in maybe 2018, maybe 2021 or so because of those other modifications. I think as a result, some of these A through F are not broken out quite properly. It doesn't change the reading of it or application of it. But for instance, you got to pay attention to where the semicolons and the commas are, right? So I'm just pointing this out because I'm a nerd this way in a lot of ways, I guess. And I said earlier that was my last joke, but it wasn't. So I apologize for that too. But for instance, at item C, it says the definition includes producing or storing feed for use in, okay, you with me so far? The production of livestock. I'm not going to read the rest. After rabbits, it says, and the production of poultry with no semicolon between those two. So really, it should read, C and D should be combined with a comma after rabbits and an and, where it's limited to the production and storage of feed for livestock or poultry. But then you get down to E, and that's a separate standalone exemption, producing plants, trees, fowl, or animals, and that one's broad enough to capture everything, right? So the distinction is really almost irrelevant. But I would also say that at the very end of F, where you see the semicolon and farm buildings and farm ponds, that farm buildings and farm ponds really should be G,
Mm.
a standalone exemption
Got it.
that doesn't tie into production of aquaculture, horticulture, dairy, livestock, and poultry. I mean, it's a separate and distinct recognizable exemption under the definition of agricultural exemption, farm buildings and farm ponds. And so it stands out even more that way to me, but it's no closer to helping you define or limit what a farm building might be or what someone might claim a farm building is. I think that if they intend to construct just about anything that is proposed and will be used in furtherance of the agricultural operation, then it would qualify as a farm building.
Okay.
Now, well, let me finish and then I'll get back to my now. Here's the 60-5 reference, I think, that you all were pointing to. B4 here, where the reference to that state law definition as an exemption to the tree canopy conservation requirements. Question there?
Good. Made sense.
Now, what I said I was going to put off, I've lost my thought on it. But any questions so far as to anything that we've discussed or gone over? I will. Well, let me pause and let you ask any questions. You might.
I'd just like to make a comment that anybody watching this, it sounds like it's very easy to be ag exempt if you meet this definition, but keep in mind, you, the property owner, are liable and responsible for any silting up creeks, neighbors' issues, and that can get extremely expensive if you don't follow best management practices. And even if you do and have a torrential downpour, that's a lot of money to put a creek back to its natural state. So, and the city's doing what it can to protect itself by approving or denying this, to get the liability off us, but it will be on the property owner if things go south during this process. So that just,
And your neighbor will sue you.
yeah,
for
we've
flooding
seen
their
that.
property. Yeah.
And it can get really ugly really quick, especially if the state gets involved. That's not fun.
Now, I will say that with the sort of broad definition of agricultural operations and the exemptions that state law provides, that does open up avenues to generate perhaps some other specific definitions like hobby farm or some of these other things that we're going to discuss, and say, all right, homeowners, if you want to go down a certain track, if you want to be recognized or designated as a certain use that's a sort of a subcategory of the agricultural use, and if you'll do all of these things that we want you to do, you'll get sort of all these concessions. And I think that's, whatever those things are, is what we're working towards to try to define, to push forward as a recommendation on trying to support certain activities or certain outcomes, and how can you go about doing that?
Yeah, I have.
Is that a good segue for you?
Yeah.
All right. You'll want to,
Yeah.
thank you. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Jeff.
it very much. This was great. Very informative.
Yes. So. Oh, it started over. Okay. So, as Jeff has already told you, and this is just an essence of, this is not exactly what state's definition of agricultural use, but this is just an essence, and I'm not going to read this, but it's really broad, and you may qualify. I mean, this comes with the qualifying criteria. It's not like you just have to have this use on your property. So you may qualify, but what we are proposing is, as a first step, city needs to have a solid application process for people to get pre-approved for agricultural use exemptions with the criteria that matches the state regulations. And and as I said, not everyone's going to.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yep.
Well, go ahead and finish your statement. Before you moved on, I just had a question about,
Yeah, go ahead.
this definition is a bit different.
Yeah, that's what I
From
said.
the
It's
one we
just the
read.
summary of what.
But it,
Feeding of livestock.
Yeah,
it's very much more limiting.
right.
I mean, it has nothing, I see nothing about keeping, feeding, or managing livestock.
Right, we're not
This is
exactly
all about
getting this.
production.
This is just a generally, I'm just trying to draw some.
But
essence
whose
of-
wording is this?
This is just wordings that this is not even exactly what we have in the code right now. It's just some words we put together just to like shorten and just to summarize what is included.
But I
and
guess
what's
my
not.
point is, if we want farm owners that own, manage, feed, and keep horses included in this
Mhm.
definition, these words don't do that.
Right, I'm gonna go to
So we
that.
need to modify
Production
that.
needs to be gone.
Yeah.
Who's
It's-
doing that?
Production is not something that we are doing. No one is
Exactly.
producing
The other
horses
definition
for
was
market
much
here.
more accurate.
We are actually going to match the state's
Okay.
definition. We're not going to do this.
I don't think you're being asked to endorse this as the definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just a
It's just
summary.
been kind of confusing.
Okay.
Yes. So as I said, not everybody is going to have agriculture as a primary use on their land. Most of the landowners have it as a secondary use. They have a house and then they're doing other things. So, and most cases, these are hobby farms. So we want to actually kind of distinguish between the legitimate agricultural use exemption and the cases that we have, that's a hobby farm.
But
And city may be able to have some incentives just for the hobby farms.
let me ask you a question. I promise I'm not trying to keep us here all night, but if there's a residence on the house, Jeff, would that say this is a primary residence and a secondary farm? Or could you say this property is used to be a farm? The primary reason for this property is a farm. We also live on this property, like a lot of farmers do.
Most farmers live on their property.
But you see what they're saying? That
Yeah, I don't think
the
having a
primary
residence
use?
on the property is a qualifier, one way or the other.
Qualifier?
It is not a qualifier. It's not conditioned on, yes, there's residential use of the property, or no, there's no residential use. of
So
the
you're saying
property.
it's not relevant necessarily to the definition of agricultural operation?
Well, if the activity that's sought to be conducted is construction of a house,
Yeah.
then that's the permit they would, even if the property is
If you're
used
disturbing the backyard
agriculturally,
for your kid's playground,
you still
it's
have to
different.
come in and get building permits and everything
Right.
else that apply to the
I get that.
construction of the residence property. Just because, let's say you have a 12-acre parcel and you've got 1 acre carved out for your residence. Let's say you have a cuba on the rest of it. Let's say you don't. That may or may not matter for purposes of the plan that gets developed here. But the area around your house you're using as residential,
Right.
but some activity on the remainder of your property may fall within the definition of agricultural use. And if it does, it's
Right.
It's an exemption.
Makes sense.
I was just making sure that
Yeah.
just because you had a house, like 99% of these do, you wouldn't say, well, the primary use is not a farm, it's a house, it's a residence
Yeah,
with a
yeah.
farm.
Yeah. I
Well,
wouldn't-
to
I
Jeff's
wouldn't
point, if you
consider
have a cuba,
primary or secondary use.
You might have 1 acre as your house, you might have 20 acres as the rest
There's
of the
nothing in the
operation.
definition that says that the use that we're talking about has to be a primary use or
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay,
or a secondary.
that's all I need.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Shuba, keep going.
Yeah, you're good. So I'm just trying to go to the hobby farms from the pure agricultural use basically, and what we're trying to say is that we could have some incentive, maybe not the stormwater management or erosion control relief, but there could be some different set of incentives just for the hobby farms. And
Would they be less incentives or more incentives than the agricultural?
there would be less because they can't be at the same level. They have to be.
But if you look at the-
what cities under?
But if you look
what's-
at the state definition of an agricultural operation, the state doesn't distinguish between a hobby farm and a 1,000-acre farm. I mean, if you meet the definition of
That's
agricultural
why we're going to
operation.
create a new definition for hobby farm, which we think is what's happening in Milton. So that way we can have those incentives for pretty much everybody who has a hobby farm. So first step for us is to actually kind of agree on what we think hobby farm is. So this is something we have put together as a definition. And obviously it is open for discussion. We can add on things if you think we are missing something. But this is what we think. If we have a definition, if we add it in the UDC as a separate use, and then we can think about having a different set of incentives that Milton residents can really take advantage of. That's the idea we are trying to come to, and by kind of distinguishing the real agricultural use exemption to the hobby farm, we want to know if this approach, you like this approach, so that we can offer incentives to more people.
Can you go back to the last
Sure.
slide? I think you need to differentiate production on this. You need to say specifically production, batch production of eggs, honey, vegetables, flowers, and similar. And you need to say ownership of livestock. You need to separate those because there's not horses that are, there's not any farm owners here that I know of that are producing horses to take to market to sell. So you just need to differentiate. The production in the world of agriculture means I'm taking this bushel of corn to market. It does not have anything to do with the hobby type horse owners that we have here in Milton.
I mean, I'd like to see hobby farms have an option if you don't qualify for an ag exemption, then we have incentives.
Exactly, but I think in this definition right here,
There's not really.
You want to remove the
First of all,
word
I-
production.
I have what you call a hobby farm, but it is not a hobby for me, okay? I do not produce animals to take to market
Right.
nor sell.
Right.
Is there any hobby farms that wouldn't qualify as an ag definition?
Not according to the definition that I read from Jeff's presentation.
I mean, I'm under 10 acres. I can't get CUVA. I can't do anything.
Cuba's irrelevant though.
The Cuba's a whole different animal.
No, I know, but in the world of
It
agriculture.
may be that the activity of a hobby farm, let's say that's a defined thing, right? It may be that the activity of a hobby farm already falls within the exemptions that are available because it's an agricultural use. But if the city defines hobby farm in a certain way, recognizing that the exemptions apply, exemptions just prevent you from having to follow certain permit requirements. But that doesn't get you any incentives. And so I think what you might consider is akin to a CUBA. If you want to go down a certain path and be almost registered as a certain, let's say hobby farm. Let's say the definition of hobby farm under the UDC, which is a defined use, is a property owner who comes in and applies to be designated as a hobby farm under the definition that the city comes up with in order to achieve certain benefits that they don't get just by the exemptions under state law.
Mhm.
It's additional benefits, it's additional incentives, it's additional positives.
Yeah.
And it may require them to maintain that hobby farm status for 5 years or 10 years, or there may be some
I guess
sort
it
of
really come down to what those incentives are.
That's right.
Right.
That's
I mean,
right.
it would-
And I think
That's ultimately, for someone to actually want to fall into that category versus agricultural operation,
Yeah.
it would just depend on what the incentive.
But the
I
incentive,
honestly-
isn't just the exemptions from the permitting requirements.
Right.
I think that's kind of
Yeah, I get that.
already available. It's what can we do on top of that to further incentivize
Now that I
locking
get.
things
I-
up
yeah.
in some way.
Initially, we were
great.
saying that hobby farms would get less incentive. Than
Well, it won't get the same set of incentives, which are maybe a real higher value to some people.
Right.
But it will have some other incentives that are, add on to.
Okay. All right, let's
I think
keep
we
going.
discussed those.
Can we
next
just call
time.
it non-commercial? I mean, a hobby farm,
I don't know.
I mean,
Maybe we keep brainstorming. Sorry, keep going.
no. I just think that's where we're getting held up because, you know, I'm not a commercial farm. I don't teach riding lessons. I don't have people coming and going on my property. I guess I'm a hobby farm.
But that's not in the commercial, what we're talking
Commercial's
about,
not
it's
in
not
the
in there.
definition.
so we don't-
Commercial's not a
no, so we don't
definition?
even need to talk about, we don't want to even bring that up again.
Well, I know, and production to me is commercial, so that's where I'm
And maybe
getting.
there's an incentive
That's where I'm getting.
if a farm was to offer commercial goods, that there would be an incentive for that. That's different. I don't know.
I
That's
think we
what I
need to
was
explore
trying-
what those incentives would be.
Yeah.
And we can work together on that.
Yes, so that's the topic we want to handle next time,
Sure.
but we're open to everybody who wants to come in and comment here and give us their, ideas.
Yeah, you keep
What
going.
those
I think
could
for
be
the-
for specifically for these types of land uses, so.
In the spirit of efficiency, let's by all means keep going, and then we can follow up with that on some of
Right,
it.
but this is the thought process we have.
Okay.
We will have ag use exemption, we will clarify that, we'll adopt that definitely, we have a version in UDC, to be honest, and we have some framework for how to get ag use exemptions. We will update that, and we can add this definition, obviously, after your feedback. What do you think about that idea of differentiating two set of incentives?
I'd
Two
like to
tiers,
know-
I guess these are two tiers.
I'd like to decide on the incentives before we even think about messing with the UDC. Before we even put anything on
Yeah,
hobby
of
farms,
course,
so.
of course, we can discuss, but as a direction, you are okay to go and identify the incentives just for hobby farms.
Yeah, because there could be some incentives that an ag exemption wouldn't give you.
Yeah, I think
Now-
it's worth exploring. How about that?
We just need to have a conversation with legal on what all we're allowed to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah,
know how
it's
that's.
just, it's not
I got
just
plenty of
legal, we
ones
also
that I can give
actually
you.
have to work with the staff, like city engineers and, the zoning manager to make sure that we're not overdoing anything,
Okay.
or-
Sure.
But that's the, thought we have right now for widespreading the benefit, basically,
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So with that, that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm open.
Can you send us those definitions that you just put up?
Oh, yeah.
Can you send that
I
to-
can send you, but those are just
Rough
some
drafts.
words.
No, it's fine. I think it's a good starting point. I'd love to
Absolutely. I
have the
will
committee have a
send
chance to look at it and make any suggestions on language or any
Oh,
of that
yes,
kind of stuff.
yes. I will
Yeah.
send you this.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheba.
Thanks, Shubha.
We appreciate it. Good discussion. Anybody have any comments, questions before we move on? If not, we'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is item B, discussion of Birmingham Park Cleanup Day. Ranger Jen.
I mean, I'm definitely not going to be as riveting as that presentation.
Oh, come on.
I don't have as many dad jokes. I'm a mom, not a dad. Dun, 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 dun. We're going to do that second because last minute I remembered that I had something to put on the record for you guys. We're building a kiosk. I budgeted last year to put a kiosk in at the horse trailer parking lot, which will house a map, just like the lower parking lot. So it's been requested by the residents and it's a natural fit, right?
Absolutely.
So Jimmy in our Public Works Department, he's awesome. He agreed to build this for us with some equestrian features on it that'll make it look a little more Milton Farm. And then that tiny little arrow right there tells you it's going to go right in front of those garden beds. So it'll be front and center. It'll be a really pretty feature.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
but I just like everybody to know what we're doing in there before
Yeah.
we do
Perfect.
Perfect.
How's that,
it. So before, you can expect that before the spring.
Maps are good.
when is that Eagle Scout doing his project?
Good question. I haven't signed his paperwork, and usually when we sit down to it's a long process for them to write up all the specs to it. And then usually when I sit down to sign it, I'm like, what's our timeline? sometimes that moves. I think this spring is his dedicated time.
Cool.
Yeah. So that'll be nice too.
Good job.
All right. Your trail cleanup day. Favorite time of the year?
Absolutely.
I get to see you all with chainsaws and 4x4s. I put an email out. I copied you in on it to all of our adopt-a-trailees for that park. And I said, hey, if you can get your inspections done on your trails, so that gives the committee an opportunity to kind of understand where down trees might be, narrow areas that you could work out. I got 3 inspections back, so that was good so far.
What's our trail? Which color do we have?
You have yellow.
We have yellow?
Yep. And
All right,
you'll
so we need to go do our inspection and give you some feedback.
do it that, you could do it that day
Okay.
and then manage it
Yeah.
on that day. That's
Okay.
fine. But I have a couple other projects that have been pending for some time. I went out, I think a year and a half ago, and put diamonds up on all of the trails. So I have a color for every trail that's out there marked.
Nice.
Which I'd like to say is helpful, but I got some more feedback that said, hey, we could use more. Because I only marked every 0.1 mile so that everybody knew the distance that they were doing. And then I put a few arrows on these to indicate like this way is yellow, that way is blue.
Oh, good.
Super helpful.
But yeah, it's so helpful. Even for me. I mean, I've walked that a million times over and I still go out and I'm like, yeah, we need a marker there. So I could use some help with that, having people out on the trails. You're going to get to a confusing spot. That's probably the perfect place to put a trail marker. The big question is, do you want us to open this up to the public and welcome folks? And if we do, then that means we need to have projects for them to work on if they don't come with equipment or 4x4, side-by-sides.
Yep.
So open discussion. I mean, most of you have been out there before, so you know what's expected. I don't have any big projects in the works because since we've adopted all the trails, the people do the work. It's really great.
Yeah, keep up with it.
Yeah.
The first year we ever did a park cleanup, Larry Covington, who used to be an equestrian committee member, we called him Mr. Birmingham Park, and we had 50 people show up
Oh
for
my
the first
gosh.
cleanup day. I mean, it was a huge crowd. I remember the mayor came and did a welcome, and we did
Wow.
a huge safety briefing. I mean, it was a real event.
Yeah.
And it was, and so we literally had teams of a half dozen people. And so there were 8 or 10 different teams that went this way or that way or whatever.
Yeah.
And like each group had a chainsaw, and each group, had a safety officer. I mean, it was pretty elaborate.
Okay.
So I know in the last couple of years, the groups have been quite smaller, a bit smaller, which is great. We've still gotten a lot of work done.
Yeah.
And to your point, with the adopted trail concept, maybe the work is continued throughout the year as opposed to all in one event.
Yeah.
So I thought it was exciting when you had 40 or 50 people showing up. I would defer to you just on, is there enough work for that many people to tackle or not?
I mean, if they're qualified and they have a chainsaw, there's always work out there, as you know. Yeah, you saw what we ran into last year. I pulled all the barbed wire out. So if we found more barbed wire, that's a whole 50 people job in itself. But yeah, I'm at the same place that you are.
I think it's a wonderful way to bring community together.
Yeah.
You get people. I mean, even if people are only there for an hour and a half,
Oh, yeah.
it's still a great opportunity to come out, especially if we could, have coffee or, just do something to get, people talking and excited about the trail. And,
That's right.
so my initial reaction would be, I'd love to open it up to the public and try to get more people from within the city to come out and participate.
Then I'm happy to do that. I
Even
don't
if
want to
they don't do a lot of
overwhelm
work.
anybody with having community folks show up, but this is a great job for the
Mhm.
community. It's low labor.
I mean,
And-
I did it.
Emily did it with
I
me.
nailed diamonds to trees with you, so I can attest to the fact that it's a very easy
You didn't hit your
project.
thumb with a hammer?
No, I'm talented.
Hey, see?
Come on now.
She and Matthew even learned how to use a chainsaw, so that was fun.
Oh, that's fun.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Well, then we can definitely do that. So Emily and I will work on getting a promotional plan out there and reaching out to all
Definitely
of them.
put something on the Friends of Birmingham Park.
Yes.
yeah.
Facebook
And then-
page, because that's a pretty active
Are you
page.
still managing that
I am
page?
not. I cannot because it is too labor intensive. There
Okay.
are so many messages that come through on that. I handed it back over to Julie.
Okay, so Julie
There's so
will
many
put things
comments
through?
and so many messages, and there's a couple of really good people that are accessing those trails every weekend. I can put
Mhm.
you in touch with that would be very good at getting there. And
Love that. Yeah, especially people who use it regularly. I would
Mhm.
love to see them out there. So
there's
it's
a
kind of
girl
my,
that posts on Cherokee Equestrian like every week. Hey, I'm going to Birmingham Park at noon. Let's go.
that's good. Yeah.
So you definitely need to know who she is.
Yeah, there's a group. It's called it's escaping me, but I ran into a few ladies that are part of this like large global group,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a women's Western riding group. So they're really active out there, and they give me their feedback regularly, which is helpful
They
for
should
me.
come and help.
Yeah. I'll have to reach back out. I have their numbers.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
We're
Well,
looking forward to it. This is going to be a good one.
I think so too. There's a lot of down trees, so the three of you be ready with your chainsaws.
No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So I think it'll be a good time, and just let us know what we can do, and we can sync up and, figure out how to, I'm happy to go out
The
and do
big
it.
question is, are you bringing your equipment, you and you?
I'm good to bring saw.
Okay.
3
Cool.
chainsaws.
Yeah.
And if you want things, like last year you asked me for, our IV control
Oh,
chemicals. You asked me for a few other tools. I'm happy to bring them out.
Yeah, if you've got concentrate weed killer, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And we could definitely mix that up while we're
Okay.
out there. Now that we've got a water source, especially, that'll make it really easy to do.
Usually the maintenance guys will pre-mix it for me and we go.
Okay.
Great.
Sound good?
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
This is
Jen.
going to be great. And are the Trails Committee, are those guys all coming out?
Yeah, Stephanie and I think Scott said that they would be there.
Okay, good deal. So
But we have a meeting next week, so I'll poke them and see if anybody else is interested in learning.
let us know what we can do. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no
That's a
problem.
great update. Anybody got anything before we move on?
Mm.
All right. We've got all our staff updates. Next item on our agenda is new business. And we'll start out with discussion and presentation of manure removal services. Carson, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, we got John here from Equestrian Resource, and we've talked a lot about, he's got a presentation for us, but we've talked a lot about manure removal, and it's a very difficult topic. This guy's an expert in it. He does the larger farms. He does Max Farm. So, but John, you take it away, and we can have some discussion afterwards and go
Good
from there.
evening, everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks for sitting
Thanks
through
for
all that.
coming.
Thank you. I'm John Stein, owner of Equestrian Resources, and we are solely a hauler of horse manure by dumpster. But we do something unique in what we do with it. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. So we collect it only by dumpster. And we have 2 locations. They're farms that we have. One is in Bartow County, North Bartow County. The other one is in Gordon County. And each farm has an 80,000 square foot building on it. We put the manure inside the building. I wouldn't say we are truly composting it, but that is the idea eventually. Because in composting, you have to turn a pile. You have to make sure the moisture is right and the temperature is right. Well, all we're doing at this point is just putting the manure in the building. All we want to do is the end goal is to get it to dry. So it sits in there in a huge, long windrow in both buildings. And for 9 to 12 months. And when you go in after 12 months, not touching that manure, and you kick that pile, it is dusty dry. And the whole reason for putting it in the building, I'm not going to read all these, is, let me go back, we grind it. And we can't get it to go through a grinder. It plugs up the grinder. If you take it right out of the dumpster, horse manure is wet and heavy.
And
Weighs
it's
about-
mixed with shavings, right?
It's mixed with shavings,
Yeah.
some hay, some straw. And depending on what the farm uses for bedding, it might be shavings, it might be sawdust. But when it gets wet, it is heavy, 800 pounds per cubic yard approximately. And the thing with the dumpsters is, with a horse farm, every square inch of that dumpster is full. It's not like a construction dumpster. It's got a few 2x4s and insulation, whatever. So the dumpsters are very heavy. At any rate, it'll plug the grinder. You just cannot put that wet mixture in the grinder. So that's the whole idea. Put it in the barn, let it dry, pull it back out. That's a photo of it being ground. You can see how dusty it is. And then we put it on farm fields and we spread it on hay fields, mainly hay fields and pasture land. It can go on corn also, but as many of you probably know, I think you saw this. This might even be some.
Oh, good stuff. They're only the best. Yeah.
It just smells like peat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's hasn't been mixed with anything, hasn't done anything. It's only been sitting inside a building for a year. And it has almost the same nutrient value as chicken litter. It's high in nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So it makes a great soil amendment.
But it smells moldy.
And with the price of commercial fertilizer nowadays, the farmers love it, but it doesn't have anywhere near the nutrient levels of a commercial fertilizer. Commercial fertilizer is great. Put it on your hay for first cutting, and then after first cutting, second cutting doesn't grow. It's so fast acting. That material, you need probably about 4 times as much material with the manure as you do a commercial fertilizer, but it's got so much organic matter in it with all the shavings and the hay and everything all ground up that it's much more slower acting. And you would put it on this spring for next spring's crop. Just, it's slow acting in the soil, but it really is a soil builder. So it works out well. So we are not taking it to a landfill, which that's a whole nother issue. EPD, is really cracking down on landfills accepting any type of animal waste. In fact, we had a call, not to go off on a tangent, but we had a call from a woman in a large training and boarding facility over in Lawrenceville and begged us to come. And we said we couldn't haul it all the way around Atlanta, obviously, but we thought maybe we could go take dump trucks and load it and take it to a landfill. There wasn't one landfill in Gwinnett County that will accept horse manure. So it is becoming more of an issue. It's going to just get worse. The waste management landfill in Cherokee County on East Cherokee Road, just north of Highway 20, is $105 a ton. So if you got 5 or 6 ton in a dumpster, plus the hauling fee, it gets pretty expensive when you're hauling 3 dumpsters or a dumpster every 3 days out. So I don't know where it's all going. There is, for other haulers around the area, what they're doing with it, what they're have their own thing going, or where they're taking it or putting it. I know some probably are just taking it to northern counties and dumping it in a ravine to get rid of it. There is a big mulch producing bagging plant in Cartersville, and I know there's at least 2 haulers out of this area that haul by dumpster over there. So you got to take it some distance to get rid of it. But anyway, that's what we do with it. The problem is we probably get, it's not every week, but I would say we probably get 2 to 3 phone calls a week for farms that have from 2 horses to maybe 8 horses. No place to take it, have no idea what to do with it. Most dumpster companies, including us, even though we're small, won't drop a dumpster there and leave it because we can't afford to have the dumpster sit there for a month or 2 months. The only time you get paid is when the dumpster flips over, you know. So it just isn't justifiable. So
what's your break even? Is it once a week, or what's kind
we
of?
don't allow anybody to keep one over 7 days.
Okay.
We have one farm that's every other day. It's here in Milton,
How big of a dumpster is that?
20 yard.
Well,
We have several farms that are in every 3 days, MEC being one of them. And then 4 or 5 days after that. The farthest one is 6. But yeah, you just can't. The other thing that happens too is manure is very acidic. So if it sits in a dumpster for a month, our dumpsters all rust on the bottom. So every little while, we got to sandblast them and paint them. Because when you tip it up to dump it, if it's been sitting in there a month, you can't get it out.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to get it out. So it's almost better if it's a week or 2 at the very most, but we only do a week. It's just not justifiable.
Interesting.
So, you know, I know there's some large farm owners here in the room, and, you know, I think most large farms, for what I see and hear, I think all of them try to handle it correctly. They're trying to haul it off the property. It's a big expense, huge expense. And I don't think any horse farmer wants to pay for that. They'd rather just get rid of it somewhere in the back of the property if they could. But most, I think, are trying to do it right. The problem is the little farms, they don't have a choice except take it to the back of the property and put it in a pile. Piles aren't getting that big, you know, I mean, they're not some huge operation, but it adds up with, you know, for a while or in a while, and it's not going to go anywhere. And when EPD finds out that it's back there in a pile and it's next to a stream or water, they're going to have a cow. And as your previous discussion was, it's not going to fall on the city, it's going to fall on that owner, and the fines will be hefty.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump around a little bit, but that is, I'm not going to say names, locations, nothing. That's in Milton. And
That's the power right there.
owner, I'm not going to throw under the bus because the owner of the property was not the person. A lot of these farms, it's the trainer that rents the facility from a landowner. And maybe it's been multiple trainers over the years, but that pile is small in the picture because this was taken quite a long time ago, the Google Earth image. The piles were all around the barn, in the driveways, they were everywhere, and it had killed. All those trees look green, but on the bottom side of the image, opposite side of the pile, the trees had all died off when I was called there to look at the pile. And the manure was 10 to 12 feet deep up onto the trees. So we estimated, I think it was about 180 tandem loads to pull out of there. And it was a huge expense. So, you know, the horse farmer doesn't want to have to do it. And the owner, landowner, was stuck with it. It wasn't even his. Here's what EPD won't like. The manure pile is in the trees in the middle of the screen, and there's a pond. So every time it rains, you know where the rain, you know. And this one, it doesn't show the pond, but everything that's green, the manure pile is kind of at the bottom left corner of that barn, and it's 3 times that size now, and there's no green around it. It's all manure. And at the top left corner of the photo is a pond, a good-sized lake. So I'm not here to throw any farm owners, horse farm owners under the bus. I'm just trying to point out that whether it's a big farm or a little farm, it's potentially going to be a problem.
Yeah.
What's your solution then?
I don't have any solutions. I will get to that just in a second, maybe a couple. But that really was meant to be small farms don't budget for waste management. I think a lot of big farms also don't. My experience since September of 1986 has been working in the equine industry. And I was a developer. Worked for a couple of big firms in the Southeast. And as you were, some of the comments that were made in the earlier discussion, it kind of reminded me, but with land disturbance and working with the EPD and permitting. But one of the things that all the meetings we sat through around a table with all the department heads, and even highway department, everybody would be there, permitting and zoning and everybody, but never can I ever remember getting a question about what was going to be done with the horse manure. Nothing ever. in all those years. You know, everybody considers what the, unless they haul it off by dumpster, if it's a big, big farm. But, you know, they all are worried about where the hay's going to go, the shaving's going to go, where the veterinarian's going to come to what door, where the farrier's going to go, and traffic flows. But, you know, manure management is hardly ever thought of, how you're best going to handle it. And what's scary is that bottom figure adds up. It's not cheap. And one horse, depending on the bedding and who's, you know, cleaning the stalls and how they're doing it, average could be 1.5 to 2 cubic feet per horse per day. That's including the bedding. So,
I mean, is my math right? 10 horses is $1,500 a month?
yeah. Yeah, it can be,
I mean, I don't know
I mean-
anybody paying $1,500 a month to haul manure away.
the big farms.
$6,000 a month.
The big farms are spending way more money. It can.
Nope,
can
I'll
get-
just keep using my manure spreader.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, other than some really large operations, I don't know too many farmers around Milton that would be doing that.
Well, if it's 20 horses or more, you're picking it up once a week. So under 20, you know, so the farms that are, like I say, under 10,
Yeah,
it's still
we
a
need
lot
a
of horses.
solution for people that have like 4 or 5.
Yo, yeah, it's a lot of horses to have on your private piece of property, but it's one thing if they're just out in the pasture all day long. But, you know, if they're inside a barn, they're in stalls and in rainy weather, they're in the stalls overnight. They don't put them out at night, you know, they're in all the day. So even for the small farms, it can get expensive, but they just don't know what to do with it. So
Work for me.
I don't know. Carson and I talked a little bit about this, but there's only a couple ways to do it, and somehow you have to provide a service to the small farms. And I don't know how to go about doing that. You know, the small farms, we service some small farms, and the only thing we do is we tell them, put it in a pile. And when you think you get a dumpster load or 2 dumpster loads, it might be a couple of months, 3 months or something, will come. If they have a loader tractor, which a lot of small farms do, but a lot don't, you know, they'll just load the dumpster, we'll wait, we leave. But if they don't even have a loader of any kind, then you have to haul a Bobcat there.
You have a loader? You have a tractor?
And most do have a small one, but then you got to have a Bobcat there, and it gets expensive in a hurry. So you either have to go to the small farm and pick it up somehow, economically, or if you had some type of a transfer station where possibly they could come, even if it was Saturday mornings. And, you know, for the farms that are only have 2 horses or 3 horses, for how many muck buckets they would have, they probably, every farm has a pickup. If they've got a horse trailer, they've got a pickup. But it might be something where the small ones could just bring it and dump it. And then it has to be hauled by truck, large truck, or large dumpsters off away from the transfer station.
I mean, if a small farm had a dump trailer.
Yeah.
You know,
And a lot do have a
they could
small
load
dump
it up,
trailer.
take it to a spot and just dump it, pay a fee or whatever that looks like. And
Yep.
you have a semi convenient place for people to bring manure and drop it off?
Does City of Milton have one?
No, he's saying, do you?
I was asking if you had.
In Pickens County.
Oh, okay.
That's too far.
Yeah.
So
We could get it where if there was a fee, they would pay a fee or something, we could haul it by truck, not probably by dumpster, but semi, haul it, load it at the transfer station and haul it out.
Well, like, you know, the city's got the piece of property at Birmingham Park, right? That's all fenced off. That, what do you call that area?
Kind of like the smaller field. I feel like we've been calling it the field.
Yeah, but you know, like where they used to be the roadkill piles up there and they'd have brush piles and all that kind of stuff. I was talking to Sarah Leaders about it last week when I saw her, and I told her that we had somebody coming and she was really interested. And Emily Groth has talked about this several times.
She's no longer with the city.
What's
Just to
that?
give you the heads up, Emily Groth is no longer with the city,
Oh, okay.
but Sarah
Anyway,
Leaders.
yeah.
It's still
So
your
Sarah,
contact.
you know, and she's,
Mhm,
I'm forgetting what's the right word, Public Works.
mhm.
Got to
But-
figure out how much it's worth for people's less horses. How much would you pay? You know, like if somebody came by and did it for them, like I don't doubt not many people are gonna load up manure and take it to, I don't think a dumping station, but what if there, you know, from a business perspective, what if there's somebody else that would do it, you know?
Yeah, if somebody
Consolidate it and then,
run by once a week or once
Mhm.
every other week and, you know, pull the truck up and have the farm owner with their tractor, just put it in their truck and haul it away.
Yeah, it's just going to be how many of them have that and how long that's going to take to. So I've talked to John a good bit about this, bounced ideas off a lot of people. And the two ideas I had was I've got a guy that does a grading company. And he's like, okay, I'll tow a Bobcat, the dump truck to each farm. We'll have another dump truck following us. We'll fill it up and then we'll run one and dump it. But he's like, we got to know where to dump it. So you could potentially do something in Birmingham and put a compost plan together.
Central station that the city
where
operates
he
where you
where
can dump it.
he dumps it, and then the city would have a compost plan.
And they pull a
and then
semi in there.
well, or spread it on city pastures once it's composted. If you do it right, the other probably more economical idea was to train all the farms or do a webinar or whatever you want to do on how to compost your manure
Do all those.
correctly,
Yeah.
so that
It's
it's
awful
not
hard when you do it on a small scale.
even just covering it with tarps or doing
That's
the
what we did.
turning or
I just have
Filled your
different
pins.
areas.
Thermometer, or we have the
you know, building the pins would help get it out of the creeks. You know, the
You know
compost
what
pins.
limit of horses, you know, I know what you guys have, but, you know, it seems like if you have a half a dozen horses, you're probably, you know, I don't know what the composting effort's going to be. You're
Yeah.
producing so much material so
Right.
fast.
Yeah.
We have some big farms that have thought about doing that. When they really started digging into it and looking at it, they're like, we produce way more than we could ever.
So if we could
just
get
never
it
could do
to a station, then from there, could you pick it up and haul it?
For a fee,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
but I think the opportunity is to find somebody that would pick it up at the smaller places.
Yeah.
It's
I've
just the
got
idea.
that. It's just one farm might have one dump truck load, one might have six.
Well,
You're
do
probably-
you have any idea what this guy would charge with a dump truck?
I know what he charges per hour for dump truck and skid steer, but I kind of threw a number out there. I was like, what if we hit each farm twice a year, every 6 months, and they each paid you? We had 40 farms pay you $2,000 each.
But then we need a place for that guy to dump it.
Right.
And that's where we need help with the city,
That's where
I
we
think.
need this gentleman.
Or
Well,
the city.
I think we need the city
And then
to,
he
But then
could
you
get it.
got to make sure you don't have a mountain of horse manure somewhere
Well,
on
you
city
would,
property.
pretty fast.
You'll
And what is
eventually,
that?
I mean, if you put, I don't know how many acres, if you had 10 acres and in the city and you were
Well,
going
they're
to
not,
put,
they're not gonna have 10 acres. They're gonna have an area about as big as this room here.
well, the max you could put on it in a year, if you were going to try and do anything with it, like till it into the soil, would be 3 or 4 inches of material. So you're not talking about enough space to.
no, I'm talking about them dumping it and then you picking it up.
Oh,
Then you need to dump it almost into a dumpster.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've been moving this stuff 4 different times.
well, if
Yeah.
it can just be a transfer station that's got concrete block walls and can have a loader there and put it in a semi,
Well, it would be
a dump
nice if you
trailer.
could dig out to put your dumpsters in, and the dump truck could back up to it. Your dumpsters are
Push it in
lower.
there.
No, low. You dig out where your dumpsters go, and then you have your concrete walls, and then your truck backs up and dumps it into the dumpster. Y'all come from the other side, pick it up, rock and roll, and that way you're not moving manure.
The
3
idea
different
is to
times.
try and move as much material in a single trip as possible.
The kicker would be, what would a small farm owner with 3 to 5 horses be willing to pay for that service?
That's the question.
I really think
That's
my
the-
neighbor's got 2 horses, and I think they're gonna say we'll just keep dumping it right here on the property.
We would pay.
Yeah, not a lot. They're not going to want to pay.
I mean, they might be willing to pay $100 a month, but that's not gonna get far.
No.
It's tough.
The ones that we pick up, you know, they might pay every 3 months, they might pay $500,
Oh, I'd
something
do
like
in a
that.
heartbeat.
500 every 3 months?
Every
do that.
3
Well,
months,
that's not bad.
you know, something
That's
like that.
$150 a month.
Yeah.
ish.
That'd be
But
two
the other thing
cars a month.
is,
Right.
you know, you've got these horses, you own these horses, you knew that they weren't going to be cheap. You know, it's expensive.
Yeah, but if you're talking $5 a horse, I can't remember what the math is, but I mean,
It's $150 a month for one horse.
Yeah, 150 a month
$150
per,
a month for
per
one
horse.
Yeah. So you're talking $500, $600 a month for 4 horses.
Yeah.
But you know, you just said you'd be happy to pay $200 a month, but how about $500 a month? That's a lot, I think.
We have our
Not me.
bins. I mean, we're doing it the right way, but it's just, you know, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Going out and turning it and watering it.
I need to ask my
covering
tenant what
it.
she pays for her dumpster. She gets picked up every other week.
I think I'm just gonna
Pretty
buy a
simple.
new spreader.
Yeah, manure spreaders are
I'm
a
just gonna buy
solid
a new
option.
one.
When you go west from here and you get over where I'm from in Cartersville, you know, the farms over there's one farm over there that's got 60 horses on 350 acres. You wouldn't know there's any horses. I mean,
Yeah.
and the problem is in this area, if it's a horse farm, every square inch is devoted and needs to be devoted to paddock space,
Yeah.
not open land.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't do them any good to have open
Right.
land, so they want the pasture.
Gosh.
There isn't one.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, we'll keep working on it.
Good
So
stuff.
I didn't have any solutions. I just,
No, that's a great
I'm bringing
It's
conversation.
really
it
good.
to
We've been
your
talking about it for
attention.
years, so it's
No,
good to have you
You're a
here.
good resource. A very good resource.
So,
Well, we'll brainstorm on it a little bit. Maybe we'll come up with some ideas and buy you lunch and figure out how to brainstorm on it a little more, come up with a concept.
But can't they include that in the large lot incentives?
What's that?
Sean.
Thank you so
Include that in
much.
large lot incentives?
I learned
That would be
something.
interesting.
I
Yeah, we
didn't
can tie it
know
to
you
the large
even
lot incentive.
existed, and your process is pretty cool.
I do think it's something that the city's interested in. You know, when Sarah, the Director of Public Works, she and I talked about it last week, and, you know, her eyes
The
lit
guy
up,
that's
and
been
she
waiting
knows
to
that's
do my
something that
presentation.
needs to
That's
get
my
figured
guy.
out.
Hunter's gone.
I think the residents would. I think there's just a cost benefit factor that, you know, like Shannon just said, she'd be happy to pay $200 a month, but she's not gonna pay $500. I wouldn't pay $500 a month to have my manure removed. You know, it's just not worth it. You have to, you know, you pass it on to your tenants or your boarders, which is, you know, fine, but for people that have a handful of horses that don't have all that, it's just upping their expenses. So, you know, but thank you for that.
Yeah,
That was
thank you.
really
Thank you.
informative. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, man.
All right, any other questions or discussion on that before we move on, guys?
Food for thought.
We've been here for a while, so let's,
Food
Let's
for
keep this
thought.
brief.
all right,
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about pasture planting?
1 minute.
Go ahead.
All right. So with the manure, we had another guy who's come in on pasture planting, but so we have large lot incentives for current farms and then new and renovating farms. So the current ones aren't going to be doing much of ag exemptions and all that stuff. So
Okay.
me and Shannon are thinking if we could explore his manure item, pasture planting, we got a guy that we could almost contract this out through the city, but have someone offer to, I'm going to pay him to do mine. It's cheaper almost for me to pay him than for me to do it.
Right. And he's gonna, what, drill it and
He's
seed
going to
it?
no-till drill.
Mhm.
He's going to, so seed the whole thing, rye, fescue, whatever you
Will he
want.
fertilize too?
Yep, fertilize, herbicide, spray, whatever you can think of, they can do it.
Okay.
But it'd be a great thing to get a group rate with all the
100%.
different farms, especially these, like he's saying, these smaller farms, they're trying to get every square inch of pasture. Well, if you seed that pasture with a no-till, you got way more grass. And then the other part of this was me and Shannon were talking about bulk. I don't know what the need is. I don't think it's hay because everybody has their own preference, but feed, shavings, or something where we could go to a supplier and say, okay, we've got this many farms and you do a delivery and we can order in bulk and get a group rate. So you can get that stuff delivered to your farm.
The challenge, I think, with that particular part, now, as far as the drilling and seeding, I think it's an awesome idea. Because if you try to go to Cherokee Feed, you gotta book it a year out.
Yep.
So, you know, if there's somebody who offers that service that, you know, we could figure out how to
That's
promote,
what I was
I
trying
think he would
to-
have business right out of the gate. I think it'd be a great solution. As far as like the shavings and all that kind of stuff, my impression are that most of the suppliers of those types of products, they are stacked mean, when I call our guy and say I need a load of shavings, he says, I'll put you on the list.
Yeah.
Because he's got 30 other people that are calling him at the same time wanting shavings. And so I don't,
I'll sell you guys shavings. Bring them on. I'm just kidding.
but so I don't know about that part. Because I don't know too many shaving suppliers that are begging for business. It strikes me as that they got all they can handle.
Yeah, there are some efficiencies. I think there's some business ideas, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
it.
know. We were just kind of thinking about that because Cherokee Feed and Seed, $100 to come deliver 6 bales of hay and
Oh,
20
geez.
bags of
80.
shavings.
It's
and-
80 for me.
No, it's 100 for me. And so we were saying, okay, well, for
I'll talk
the
to you offline
smaller-
about that. I'll give you a better solution than that.
Okay,
$100
please do.
delivery. Yeah, I got a great option for you.
So we don't do it. We've done it once, and my husband's like, "This is dumb. We have a truck. Let's just do it."
Right.
But it's just a pain. And so we were trying to think of an incentive, like something that but it may be too convoluted. I don't know.
What's the current farm incentives we're working on that side of it? Because a lot of stuff we talked about tonight is not going to apply to.
Yeah, we're trying to
People
think
Yeah,
of
I don't care
current-
about new people.
Right.
I know you don't,
Current-
but we, believe it or not, we
It's
got
both.
like,
It's not either
we
or.
got like
No, I
20 of
know.
them being built.
What?
We have about 20 new ones being built.
But then once they are built, then they're going to be
They're
existing.
gonna
and
be
they're gonna
existing.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So-
There's part A and then there's part B. Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So no, this is a good discussion. I think we definitely that needs to be part of our incentives is coming up with solutions on this stuff. So, all right. Well, let's move on to our next item, which is discussion on emergency preparedness. And
Yes.
our guest has been very patient.
Yes.
So we appreciate that. Nan, you want to introduce him?
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Mike Gelb. Mike Gelb owns Hunter's Glen. He owns Wilson Products. They do a lot of horse clothing, custom products, as well as just off the shelf blankets and things. Mike was kind enough to loan us the big giant horse we used for Meet the Neighbors last year. Mike is an international level competitor. He has a farm over in Europe as well. He's a jumper rider, and he's been in this business for a long time. He's uniquely qualified in that he has gone through all the T-layer training and things. He's also previously owned his own T-layer equipment. With the advent of Milton starting up their T-layer program, he sold it.
And the only guy Milton has a snowmobile as far as I know.
So Mike is pretty active in emergency preparedness for other counties and gets called out to rescue bulls and all kinds of interesting things. So
Pulled a bull out of a well.
what we want to talk about is just kind of open the discussion about providing extra services if something like Helene starts. And Mike had an interesting episode happen at his farm that he wanted to tell you about, kind of some complications that happened with. So with that, I'll give it to you, Mike.
So thank you for having me here. And it's just in the back of my mind all the time. We have 50 plus horses at our facility. Our area has a huge number of horses. When we had the last hurricane threat come, someone came into my store and they said to me, "My gosh, you're awfully calm, considering what's coming." And I said, "I'm prepared." I had enough trailers at my facility. I stayed at my facility. I had backup generators for the wells. I have backup generators for my backup generators in case there was a problem. But that's how I am. I went through FEMA training. I went through the TLAR training. And it does concern me that if there was a problem here, there is not a plan. When the storms hit Tuscaloosa years ago, I did still have all of my equipment. I went to Tuscaloosa. To see the chaos is just, you can't imagine. And it's simple things. It's things like having enough portable panels that if horses are running around, how do you corral them? Who's organizing all this? Who has the telephone list? I think it would be a great thing if Milton was able to organize some type of disaster management. You can go the next level. What Nan was talking about is we had an elderly horse slip and fall at our facility 2 weeks ago. We call it Cherokee County because my facility is actually Cherokee County, even though it is less than a mile from Milton's fire department. Cherokee's equipment was in Waleska, and they called on Milton, and Milton's equipment was down. A large number of guys from both Cherokee and Milton came. The guys were phenomenal. They wanted to do anything they could do to help. I couldn't say enough about them all, but their hands were tied because they had no equipment. And eventually the equipment arrived from Waleska. It was 2.5 hours from the original 911 call till the horse was up. Not the fault of the guys by any means whatsoever. Privatizing horse rescue in an area like this is not a bad idea. If there was a catastrophe, if we had a tornado, if we had a hurricane, it is not the responsibility of the fire department to worry about where the animals are. They have to work on lives, they have to work on buildings. And if it's possible, I tried once before, I invested right at $250,000 in equipment. And unfortunately, we couldn't get people on the bandwagon to support it because you do have to have a telephone list, people who are trained, people who will drive the vehicles. It can't be a one-man situation. I'd love to help from anything from just a plan to if they wanted to organize a actual rescue. I'm here to help, but just kind of planting a seed and telling you guys that, you know, if what was predicted and did hit North Carolina hit our
Oh my
area,
God.
let me tell you, it would have been chaos.
Right.
It would be total chaos.
It would have been chaos. So having a plan would make a huge difference. And it's almost to the point where you would have to require your larger horse farm owners and managers to attend, because people are not going to just voluntarily come to a meeting. Nobody understands until they've experienced it. I experienced it on our farm in 2009 when the floods came. And thank goodness we were able to take care of everything. Not everyone was so lucky. Traveling to other areas, like I said, in Tuscaloosa, when you see the devastation, you have to have a plan. You really have to have a plan.
2009 was bad too.
What's that?
2009 was bad. You guys,
2009
were you guys
was
pretty
bad.
underwater
We
there?
had 6-foot deep water on my farm.
Holy cow.
We thankfully evacuated. We evacuated to Wills Park, and they were very accommodating. Some people from the community saw what was happening and immediately came to help. What is it? The farm on Chattahoochee.
Huntcliffe.
Huntcliffe.
Yeah.
Huntcliffe was,
They
there
evacuated as well.
was about a dozen farms that had evacuated to Wills Park.
Right.
And, I don't want it to ever happen again. Could it happen again?
Sure.
Sure could.
It will
It could.
eventually.
And, again, seeing what happened in North Carolina, our community was phenomenal. The Wills Park Equestrian Foundation organized a collection, and it was Milton people, it was Alpharetta people. It was a huge turnout of people to help. And even that was just such a
It
small,
was like three weekends in a row. 3 weekends in a row, they were loading, 10 horse trailers up, going up there with supplies.
We filled over 100 pallets the first day.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, that's
So,
big.
But again, it could have been us too.
Well, I think what I would like to do is I'd kind of like to dovetail this kind of information thing into the community things that I discussed last weekend, where I wanted to have quarterly outreach programs for the community, seeding and fertilizing, fire safety. I think this kind of thing would kind of fall into that. I'd like to find somebody that would like to sponsor that and have it at their farm. Tony was kind enough to do our fire safety seminar. So I'd like to kind of work on that and maybe the problem that I'm finding is I put something in the Milton farm owners Facebook page that I was like, okay, guys, here we are, Milton Equestrian Committee. What can we do for you? Give us some ideas of what you want. Guess what? Complacency is alive and well. So I guess I'm just going to have to come up with things to give back to the community. This is very, very important. And I think I'd like this to be our first project of getting that information out to the community, or developing a plan, developing a call list. Who are the veterinarians? Who are the people that are on call? And I don't know how to do all that. So,
And who has what equipment?
and who has what equipment. I think that's the biggest thing. So when we have an episode like Helene, I don't even know, let's say that we did, I don't even know where our T-layer equipment, if it would even be able to be employed, because those first responders are going to be responding to human things.
Right.
So when we talk about privatizing, I don't know if that's a dream or if that's, something that we could do. I don't think we could fundraise, but I don't want that to be a stumbling block. I want to get the community educated in a way that they can help themselves, because there ain't gonna be anybody to help them.
Mike, have you had any conversations with our fire department?
Been a long time.
Okay.
A long time ago. So actually, if we go to the beginning of that, Jenny and the GHJ juniors raised the money for the first rescue slings that were donated to Milton to start their T-layer program. And
Good.
right after that, I donated all the helmets for protecting the horses' heads during the lift. And then it kind of took off from that. And Cherokee County, like I say, also has their program as well. The biggest issue right now is equipment being tied up in other areas.
Right. I know I was on the Milton Fire Corps for a couple of years, and the T-layer was something we spent a lot of time talking about. John Ng, who's is the head of the Fire Corps, and I'm trying to think of what the organization is. It's like the state, it's like a state reserve or something he's part of. They all are cert trained and all that type of stuff. And I know that he would be really interested in talking about the whole T-layer opportunity. And, I know Chief Ben Musa really well. And Hutchinson, Roth Hutchinson, he's the battalion chief that owns the T-layer with the city of Milton. And I know he'd be really interested in having a conversation about it. Their truck was an old Atlanta Gaslight truck.
Exactly.
That's so old. And, they've talked for quite a while about upgrading it and getting a new vehicle. My understanding was that there has been a new vehicle, that they've identified or something like that. This has been, a few weeks ago that I had a conversation with some of those guys, but I'd love to talk to you offline and try to put together a time with our fire leadership to sit and talk about this, because I think they'd be really interested and open to talking about it. I can't speak at all to what happened at your farm. If their equipment was down, it might have been the truck was broken or
No,
something.
exactly. No, that was the situation. That's why I say the guys were great.
Yeah.
Their hands were tied. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. But I do think they'd be really open to brainstorming and trying to come up with a solution that may not fix every scenario that you could come up with, but would certainly improve the response and that type of thing. So if you'd be open to that, I'd love to follow up on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thrilled.
Yeah, I think this would be really good.
I'm thrilled. I mean, I can do all the, lists of veterinarians and people to call and, things like that, where you are going to be the boots on the ground kind of.
Well, the good thing about Milton is we have a T-layer. Not
yeah.
all towns. I mean, Cherokee obviously from what I understand, has a pretty impressive, set of equipment. But we've seen several demonstrations from our local T-layer at some of our events and whatnot. So I know they're pretty proud of it, and they really
They're
do
really
see
proud
it
of
as
it.
a real value add to our city. So anything that can be done to improve it, I think they'd love to talk about.
I'd love to be
So,
part.
okay, we appreciate that. This was good
Wonderful.
conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I apologize. I probably should have made a motion to have you at the front of the meeting.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know.
I am so sorry.
Everybody
Mike.
says that after the fact, right?
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Mike.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you for
patient.
being
Thank
such
you.
a good
Appreciate it.
trooper.
We'll
All
be
right.
talking more. I'll get your number from Nan and
Mike, I'll call you tomorrow.
Great talking, man.
Thanks so much, Mike.
All right, moving right along. Our next item on our agenda is discussion of Meet the
You know
Neighbors.
where Hickory Flat Road is? You
I'll
know where our
kick it
fire
off.
department is?
You want to kick it off?
I
Okay.
will.
It's his farm.
So knowing that we've done away with the subcommittees, I would like to propose creating a project-based committee to have a temporary planning committee, essentially, of who will the point people be to Meet the Neighbors off the ground. And then I think once we identify those people, they can meet with me separately offline on a Monday, on Teams, whatever it is, to kind of come up with a full event plan for it.
I think that's a fine idea.
You already
And,
did.
I did have a conversation with
I
Nan
have.
about this.
Passed
And-
it
You're
on.
passing the
I'm
torch.
happy to.
Passing the torch.
head it.
Okay.
Teresa has volunteered to lead it for us, which we're
Okay.
very excited about.
Are you a one-man show or would anybody like to
No, I
join
mean,
us?
I'm
Okay,
here.
okay.
But I can be the point man to start.
I want her
and
to be
then,
the point person. I'm still going to be involved. I
Okay.
just can't be the point of contact.
But I mean, I think anyone who wants to get involved with.
Oh,
Meet the Neighbors, I mean,
absolutely.
You know, I'd say anyone who's interested in, supporting Teresa in this project, speak up and jump in
I
and
want to be very
you're
involved.
going to get lots of help. We'll all help.
Perfect.
So I think that's great. So remind everybody again, the date for Meet the Neighbors,
May 10th, and as of right now, I've slated 10 to 2.
May 10th, 10 to 2. Okay. I'll definitely plan around that.
It's already on my calendar.
Do you have a thought on when you'd want to have your first meeting?
As soon as possible. I'm currently working 3 months ahead of the game, so I would like to probably have it by the end of February, ideally.
Yep. If you guys,
Sooner
once
the
y'all set it
better.
up, let us know.
That's what I'm saying.
And anybody who wants to jump in, by all means, let's do that.
Are we reaching out to vendors already to,
No, I have not fully started that process yet. I wanted to identify who our people were and then be able to vet that
if you
application through you guys.
Do you want to send me the final list of all the vendors that came last year? I don't remember. Because I had a change of city council representation, my city email was interrupted. So a lot of those emails from that timeframe are
Mhm.
not available to me anymore. So if you would send me the vendor list, I'm happy to follow up with those vendors and get an early start on this now
Right.
before they get booked out.
Speak
can't
my language,
imagine
Nan.
that, I can't imagine that they wouldn't come back, but we may have another few that we could ask.
Mhm.
We weren't too full for vendors, were we?
We were reaching capacity.
Were we?
We were pretty close. If
Really?
we were, because
Interesting.
I had slated 36 to 40, because then you also have to keep in mind, at least with parking, and it worked well, that some vendors were able to just put their vehicle directly behind their booths.
Yeah.
But for those who couldn't, then that's taking up additional parking. The space is kind of smaller. So we said 35 to 40, and we were, I think, at 36 last year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
it
know.
sounds like rain. I'm so tired of the rain.
Okay. That's
I
it
thought
for
you only had
buy-in.
one.
Well, the mini.
Oh.
And he ran from me today when I tried to, he got out today. I wanted to beat the,
That's all right. We had one get out last night
Oh,
too.
he got
Tore
out.
up my yard, so I'm ready to shoot them all.
he ran from me.
Were you
he ran
running
down the
around going, get off my lawn?
driveway.
My wife was like, no.
Oh, I was livid.
Anyway, so, well, first of all, before we wrap it up, Teresa, thank you.
Of course.
We'll be willing to do that.
Happy. I'm gonna be reaching out.
Yeah,
I'm
please
happy
do.
Emily's
Yep, no, we're so
seasoned
happy.
and
to-
she'll.
Yep.
I'll help out however I can.
Yeah, and I'll make sure Mike will lend us the horse again, but now you know who he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mike, he's a resourceful guy. Thanks. I just saw your text. Thank you for that.
I think it would be nice if we could make it more festival and active and interactive. Instead of just all the little booths to walk around. I think last year with the jumping, like the foot jumps,
That
at
was
least
so
the kids
cute.
had some activities to do. So that's my idea, is how to make it a little more fun.
That was so
Just
cute.
ask your daughter what she
Carnival
wants.
rides.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Ski ball.
I will tell you, I took creative liberties because we discussed it and I tried to book early. I have booked a husband and wife acoustic duo that are going to play. They're great. They're upbeat. They're fun. So band check.
Oh, so we don't have to worry about the music guy that used to be right at the entrance?
Oh,
Boxer Rock.
Yeah.
Their speakers are small and that's a very large field. So
Nice guy.
Yeah,
Just
he
wasn't
super
appropriate.
nice guy. I also think we have very few events that we have that allow and make sense to have live music at. Most of them are kid-based events, so Baby
Yeah.
Shark has to be on. But this is one of those that live music is a
So
solid
they'll have a
option
little
for.
stage and, oh, good.
We'll figure that out.
Look up live music. I like it.
You know what I mean?
Good.
Good stuff. Okay.
All right.
Anything else?
Now it's all you, Tony.
All me, great. All right, next item on our agenda is discussion of communication plan. I'll turn it over to Mac.
Well, it's something that we had talked about before about just, and I think Teresa and I brought it up the first time, just at least I'll speak for myself. A lot of times feeling like not really knowing what's going on in the city, not wanting to know everything that's going on, but wanting to know generally what's going on. and just how we can get information kind of gathered. And actually at the gym, Carson brought up an interesting idea. If there's a way to use AI to summarize all the other groups, bullets on their minutes, and maybe if we could summarize it and maybe send every group's minutes to every group, like the summary. That, so when you
You
send
could
out,
listen to the YouTube video
or, yeah.
and type it and say, pick out any points where it mentions
Oh, yeah.
Barnes horses, yada, yada, yada. But that's after the fact, though, we gotta remember. So if we want to be present in
We want to
it,
have representation.
Yeah.
I don't know if we do or not. I mean, I guess it couldn't hurt, but
It just feels to me like it'd be better for the city if we all generally knew what was going on,
I think you're gonna see stuff on like BZA with somebody trying to get a barn approved inside the setback, or
Yeah.
trying to, and then you would want to be proactive and be there to. Then we got to be careful. We're speaking as a
exactly.
committee,
Right.
So it's great. Yeah,
Well, it'd be nice just to know,
yeah, that too.
that's what I think.
and then you decide what you want to do with it.
That's right.
Yeah,
I mean,
think it's a great idea. Because you're right, I don't know. I never see what other committees do.
I mean, I learned stuff tonight. I wasn't planning on learning things tonight, but I learned stuff tonight, and I was like, oh, okay. I just wonder if you know what I'm saying, like little snippets.
Never spend that kind of time with an attorney and not get a bill. It's pretty good.
Exactly.
I was on my phone, plenty with my attorney today.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
How do you want to go about doing that?
Yeah, AI, man, you just lost me. I mean, even Emily had a look on her face like, huh.
I mean,
I don't know
it's-
about that.
It's the
you can
wave
tell it
of
to
the future.
summarize meetings, and it'll do it.
It'll do it. It's
Type it out in
incredible.
about 5 seconds. I could
Okay.
tell it to summarize this meeting. It'll type me out a 1-page summary.
Okay.
If it's recorded.
Have you not seen AI summaries on like public posts or reels where like
We do it on
good
text
friend of mine
now.
was
Text
just
do it.
Oh, yeah.
honored at Westminster
that's
for
right.
all of her
Yeah.
funny videos that she makes. And
Yeah.
there was an AI description of it that said, most are congratulating Elizabeth for her good humor and sharing it with us all, while
Yeah,
others.
it
I mean, you
like,
can go
it
on,
just gives you a overview.
a retailer website and ask it about a product, and it will have an AI summary of all the reviews that have been submitted for that one product. And it's pretty accurate. Like I look at my products and I'm like, dang, it's pretty accurate.
You have to ask it to do that?
No, it will automatically. They use AI software
They
to,
use it.
So what would you do? You would actually have the AI go out and grab the meeting minutes from the other committees and boards,
Mhm.
summarize them, and then monthly dump it into a report of some sort?
Yeah, but like he said, we could specify,
I don't think it's there yet to be able to. You'd have to individually put each meeting's minutes or video individual. I don't think that, and in 2 years, you could say, follow every single meeting that happens at Milton and alert me if there's anything regards to.
well, we have the videos, right?
Yeah, but I don't think you could do all of them in one batch. You'd have to do them individually. Now, 2 years from now, you do them all in one batch.
But if you knew what the BZA's agenda was for the next meeting, you would be able to look at that agenda and know if there's something on the agenda that would catch your attention, our attention, right? I think.
Are
And you
there
look and
agen-
say,
are
oh,
there-
Keywords.
Yeah.
I'm saying I could visualize it manually. If somebody gave me their agenda, I just look at it and go, all right, oh, there's a farm, seeking a variance for a
Yeah, because
running shed or a barn. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting.
Greg has
But I don't know how
always
you
posted not
But what do you do when you find
word
it?
for word what our agenda is, but he'll say,
I don't-
tonight's
I don't
meeting,
know.
the
I
Equestrian
think that's
Committee is
for
going to
us to talk
discuss.
about.
It's true. He does always give a preview of every board and committee meeting on Facebook before it even starts.
That's true.
So I guess the first point is to identify, are you guys trying to be at the meeting and be the point of contact beforehand? Or are you trying to help in the after room saying, hey, I noticed that there was some discussion on this topic. You guys were going back and forth. I'd love to provide some insight on the equestrian committee. So I guess first step is, what's the goal?
I would say possibly both. If there's a real item that's coming up on their agenda that we're really interested in as a committee, it'd be nice to know about it before the meeting, right? Because what if we wanted to attend the meeting?
Well, I always read Greg's posts on the Facebook, on the city's Facebook page. He always posts the agenda.
Mhm.
I think we asked the liaison for BZA, Michael.
Michael
We asked
Cardinal.
him, he's like, I mean, every barn that comes through usually gets approved. Like, they're very farm friendly
Yeah,
for that. So like,
they are, right?
it's not like they're telling farms like, you can't do that because the ordinance says it. They're usually doesn't. So
Do we get is there somewhere you can review monthly, quarterly, how many barns have been approved? Because like you made a point, Nan was joking about not concerned with new barns, but you're like, well, there's like 27 or something right now.
That's amazing.
Right. That is.
well, those
That's
aren't
amazing.
all equestrian, but like farms getting built. You know, I don't know if they're bringing horses or not, but
But there's 27?
I wouldn't say 27, 20. But
Still,
there's, I'm gonna
that's a
have
lot.
them on the council presentation.
Of substantial
The
acreage?
new ones, yeah.
Well, see, I think it'd be good to know like how many barns there are, which you've done. You know, how many are horse barns? How many barns have been approved this year to date for equestrian?
Mhm.
Like just to have a running knowledge
You're
of
only
that
gonna see
stuff.
the approved ones though if they're doing something for a variance. I don't know if you'd see, you might see if you pulled up records, get building permits for barns maybe, but the only time BZA would see it is if they're doing it in the setback or something.
But
that
if-
you need a
if-
variance for.
If Mac or anybody sat down with Shuba or somebody in community development and had a list or, questions like that, how many applications were submitted in 2024 for new barns or new farms or whatever? I'm sure they can pull that information, right? I mean, I don't think that's
But then what
not.
would you do with
I'd
that
give them an
information?
acreage minimum and
Mhm.
ask how many have been submitted.
Yeah, I think you come up with
Just
the
get
questions.
nosy.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a research
Knowledge,
project,
you know?
right? I mean, you just go sit down and just gather the data. I don't think it'd be that tough to gather all that stuff, would it?
I know.
No, and I'm sure there's more. I mean, that's why I'm confident saying 20 because these are just ones I see driving
Yeah.
around. So there's plenty of roads I don't go down that like, oh man, there's one going right here.
It'd be also nice to track how many farms go out of business too, or not around.
Surprisingly, not that many. Now I'm counting ones like Carol Cookerly, who was a non-active farm, and now she's making it an active.
Making
one.
it an active farm.
Or like a guy on my street, it's just an old abandoned house. Well, he's got all kinds of animals out there now, a mile of new fence. So
And that churn is gonna always happen.
I'm counting that as a new farm because it was
Sure.
nothing.
Yeah, but
It's
Carol
basically
had
vacant
fun.
land.
But then there might be somebody that just sold their farm and it was a farm, the Bates farm. It used to be a farm. Now it's still a farm, but it's not an active farm. It's just
Yeah.
an empty farm, right?
We've
So
got those noted too.
So that churn is gonna always happen.
But you don't see many going away.
Yeah.
You really don't.
I disagree.
Well, you've seen them since for a while.
There's
You sent me some.
Chatham Brothers just built one on a little farm like mine, or building,
Right,
Yeah.
next to Bell.
across the
Yeah.
street from Bell.
I mean, I have that one. I know about that one, but
What,
like,
farm's gone and they're putting houses in there?
Yeah,
That happens. I mean,
and it's going to keep happening.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's why
gonna-
we're doing all this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's right.
That's what the
Yeah.
incentives are for.
so, well, I think it's a great idea. I really do. Because,
Yeah.
I think it would benefit all of us to know
Well,
what's
the
going
info's
on.
out there now, though.
you know.
You can find it.
Yeah.
I mean, just go on the city Facebook page and you'll
Let's
find
look
it.
around at it this week.
Yeah.
We'll
Because
try
they
some
post,
different
they
methods.
post the agenda for every city council, every
I
BZA,
like it.
every us, everything. Just follow the City of Milton Facebook page. You'll see it.
Yeah, I'm all about it. And whatever we can do to support it, I think it's a great idea. Thank you for that. All right, any other questions on that? If not, in the spirit of efficiency, let's talk about our next item, which is discussion of the Equestrian Committee update to council,
I'm keeping this fresh on your brains because we slated April 21st
April 21st.
for the update, which is 2 short months away.
And that's a work session, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Which means that my mock would have to be on the 15th. So I would need the presentation by the 14th.
Mock due by the April 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I mean, I can start with sending last year's presentation over, just so you have a starting
That was
point,
my
but
suggestion. Go ahead and send it out to us if you will,
mhm.
and we can start.
I think starting to dream up some ideas of what happened last year and what some of our goals are for next year would be a
Yeah.
good place to start.
I think that's great.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and send it out and then we can start talking about it,
Mhm.
figuring out how to get different people to, we can think about the format, since our committee formats are going to shift a little bit.
Mhm.
We can just think about how we're going to organize the presentation and get everybody to start working on it.
Mhm.
So, okay. Anybody got thoughts or points or anything on that? Everybody's good on that?
Glad I brought my boat.
I mean, I
know.
I
It's
have
terrible.
my stuff from, last year, and I was just gonna expound on what we have
Yep.
done this year, and I want to talk about my outreach goals and things like that.
Well, and
So,
keep in mind, guys, even though at this point, we're not really organizing our agenda every month on subcommittees, I mean, we're still going to have very much the same type of
Yeah.
focus areas. I mean, we're still talking about farm ownership, which is tied obviously into large lot incentives and all that kind of stuff. We're still talking about community relations and all that type of thing, which meet the neighbors is a big piece of that, right? So I don't think that part's going to change, but our presentation last year to council was based on that format. So we need to think about how we want to organize that. So I think now, since we got 2 months, if we go ahead and get the presentation from last year, Emily, I think we can go ahead and start brainstorming on that and give it a first go around. So, okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, does anybody have any unfinished business or anything else before we adjourn? Everybody's wanting to be here for 2.5 hours? I would love a motion to adjourn.
Motion, yeah.
my mini's in another book.
All in favor?
Hi.
We are adjourned.
Look at that.
Gee whiz. That was a
Yeah, I did just
full size.
There you go.
agenda.
And then we-
God, I had no
How are you doing?
idea.